Over the past years, there's been a noticeable shift in how Bethesda Game Studios is perceived. Where the studio was once synonymous with great games, deep worlds, and player driven exploration, the conversation has increasingly moved towards something else entirely. There's been technical issues, there's been instability in regards to updates, and a growing sense of stagnation in the community around this game studio. There are no longer isolated incidents, but patterns that seem to appear across both new releases and updates to older titles as well. A central issue is that many of the problems don't seem random. When updates repeatedly introduce new bugs, break existing systems, or in some cases make games temporarily unplayable, it points to something deeper than a simple patch level mistake. A very recent article from Game Radar has been published surrounding the newly released Starfield expansion and its newly released patches. And it reads as follow in the headline. Bethesda releases urgent Starfield hotfix. Players say that absolutely nothing for the RPG on PS5 Pro. Base PS5 owners eagerly await their own patch targeting next week. And if we scroll down a bit, Starfield fans has been saying that the RPG is unplayable on PS5 following the port's launch on Sony's platform, prompting Bethesda Game Studios to promise hotfixes around finding a smaller number of causes behind the bugs and crashes. Now, one of those hotfixes is here, specifically targeting the PS5 Pro version of the game. And if we scroll down a bit, as Bethesda describes, the team is preparing an additional hotfix for other PlayStation 5 crashes and freezes targeting next week. Now, what this means is recently Starfield was launched on the PS5 and PS5 Pro, but it came with a lot of bugs. And some of these bugs were downright unplayable. It meant that people couldn't launch the game or people couldn't even play the game for extended periods of time, resulting in crashes after just 10 minutes or even 5 minutes of playing the game. And from the article, they also link to a post that Bethesda Game Studios made, which we see here, where we can just switch to another tab where I have the comments open. If we scroll down a bit, there's comments such as my PS5 Pro crashed in 10 minutes after the update. And we also have updates such as I've just updated and now it crashes every time I launch the game. How do I fix this? The patch has made the game more unstable on base PS5, getting severe frame drops in some battles and a frequent message saying failed to create a save as it's trying to autosave. And now the fact that Bethesda pushes out an update that breaks the game on a console is kind of fascinating actually. That shouldn't happen at all. Minor bugs such as assets not loading or rare performance dips are much more acceptable to the community and in general to the consumers. But the fact that the whole console is unable to keep the game running shows what's wrong with Bethesda. Now we know that this isn't the case of the console itself. It is the case of the game not loading or whatever the bug may be. But it suggests structural challenges in the production sides, where the complexity of the games combined with deadlines or commercial pressures from investors creates an environment where stability is often compromised, as is the case with Bethesda Game Studios as of the previous years or so. What we've seen from them is that their games are inherently system heavy. They are built around open worlds filled with overlapping mechanics, AI behaviors, and physics systems and layered interactions. These sort of design philosophies enables a high degree of player freedom, but it also means that even small changes can lead to unintended consequences. Now we have another article from PC Gamer in this case, where it reads as follows. Former Bethesda artist says every single developer has already brought up 95% of the complaints that made it to launch, but as Todd Howard told him, we can't do everything. And if we scroll down a bit, I want to highlight this specific quote in the article. We're gamers, we're going to play the game. We play and see the same things that the gamers do. That's all fair enough. Honestly, I've never respected the idea that video game developers are somehow lazy. Most are trying very hard to make a good game. Most issues stem from production, management, and the simple fact that video games need to make money and have to come out like at some point. And I do agree with this point. Many of the cases that we've seen recently, for example, with the obvious choice, Concord and High Guard and those sort of games, a lot of the issues stems from management and in general investors and financial backers being out of touch with what the player base really wants, and instead they are looking to create games that sell millions both in copies but also in skins, and they want to make the next big Fortnite game or the next big Helldivers. And it just doesn't work like that. But they continue. Now, I'm not going to pronounce this name because I frankly don't know how to pronounce this, but they share that Todd Howard expressed a very similar rub to him in those same meetings. Todd used to say in meetings all the time, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And this is very much true because you can do everything you want to do, but it actively feels like Bethesda does what nobody wants them to do. Their prioritization is almost opposite to what the player base wants them to do. And a very famous quote is from Steve Jobs, and he used to say that the customers doesn't know what they want until you show them, which is partly true in my opinion. The saying is that customers aren't fully able to articulate what they want out of products, and it's the company's job to create products that not only solve the issue that customers experience, but lessens their friction points in the process of using those products. So, creating a solution to what might appear to be the problem isn't the only way to solve it, and you have to find the tacit underlying problem of the issue. But opposite to this kind of business is Bethesda. It seems like they are very much disconnected from the industry and only does what they think are the right choice. There is an active lack of observation or interaction with the community. And in that context, every update really carries a big risk with it. The issues isn't that the bugs exist necessarily. It's that similar types of issues keep reappearing without clear signs that the underlying process has been fundamentally improved. At the same time, Bethesda has increasingly started to operate in a way that resembles a live service model. Their updates are no longer treated as finished products at launch, but as evolving experiences that are continuously updated. And in this regard, I want to highlight a very specific Easy Gamer article where Bethesda is actively investigating the Fallout 4 problems that Bethesda caused with its latest Fallout 4 update. As they state in the article, Fallout 4 overall rating on Steam is very positive as of November 2025, but its recent rating is mixed with user reviews well under 50% positive. If you're wondering why, you can thank the recent Fallout 4 creation menu update, released earlier this month alongside the creation bundle, which is struggling under a mostly negative rating. To celebrate Fallout 4's 10th anniversary, the intent was to simplify the process of finding and accessing externally developed content, the creations in question. Instead, however, it made a rather big mess of things, breaking existing mods, introducing new bugs, and causing crashes and performance issues. With Fallout fans decidedly unhappy about the whole thing, Bethesda now says it is actively investigating issues with the troublesome Fallout 4 update and Anniversary Edition, and that players should now see faster load times of the creation menu, game menu, and redemption of creation club items. What makes this situation interesting is how clearly it reflects that disconnect that I've previously mentioned. The goal of the creations update was to improve accessibility and make mods easier to use, which in theory should reduce friction for players, but in practice it actually did the opposite. It broke existing mods, it introduced bugs, and created instability in systems players already valued. So instead of solving the problem, it created many new ones, and that suggests the issues wasn't the solution itself, but how the problem was understood, because modding in Fallout 4 isn't just an add-on, it's actually an integral part of the Fallout community. However, the issues goes beyond just breaking stability and disrupting games like modding in some cases. These updates have actually introduced new bugs into the core system itself and the core game as well. Issues that didn't just appear temporarily but persisted over long periods of time. And with the introduction of this anniversary update, they of course added the creation menu as I talked about, and it rubbed people the wrong way because introducing a heavily monetized system around mods is not gonna go well with the community because they can see through what Bethesda is doing. They are introducing what they call the creation club, where you can pay for mods and have them downloaded on your system. Bethesda might voice this as a way to highlight the community, but in reality it's just a way to monetize their game. And with the introduction of the creation club and the update that came along with it, introduced some new bugs, and overall, it just failed to improve the experience. It actively made the core mechanics worse, and they just left them that way for quite a long time. And it raises questions about how these kinds of systems are being tested and maintained over time. And this was the case for the VAT system. And we see this here from an article from Polygon. After a decade, Fallout 4 busted VAT system is getting fixed. And from here, they state VATS was in fact broken. We know this because Bethesda is releasing Fallout 4 Anniversary Edition, which streamlines the modding experience, adds a few quality of life features, and fixes some issues. VATS is one of them. VATS hit chances are now consistent across platforms and no longer drop to zero or incorrect values, the patch note reads. There is no commentary or anything about this wild revelation. The patch notes just move on. Players in the comments aren't really remarking on it either, instead mostly focusing on the fact that the patch will break existing mods that aren't compatible with the new version or this game. And sure, bugs can put a stop to the enjoyment of the game, but it's a very different situation when a bug persists for almost 2 years, especially when it affects a core system. Now, they do state in the article that people weren't that annoyed by it, but I also have a feeling that since it's been 2 years, people might have just forgotten about the fact that it was broken and moved on to other games, since it's a very integral part of the game. And the fact that they just brush over it as just another bug fix is quite fascinating to me, because it wasn't just any small inconsistency. It directly impacted how players engage with the combat system. And instead of showing accurate hit chances, the system could display completely incorrect values, in some cases even showing a 0% chance to hit, even despite a very clear line of sight and no obstacles, or an almost guaranteed hit chance but obstructed by obstacles. And when something like that exists for that long, players lose the motivation to play the game and its systems. They realize that fixing the game isn't a priority, but instead monetization comes first. And where players once expected updates to improve the experience, there's now increasing skepticism when patches are just as likely to introduce new problems as they are to fix existing ones. Expectations shift, and at the same time, the broader industry context has changed. The competition within the RPG space, for example, has intensified very much in the later years here, and players have become accustomed to higher levels of technical polish and even more consistent post-launch support. Studios like Valerian and CD Projekt, despite their own challenges, have set new expectations and new levels of technical fidelity. And Starfield highlights another issue that goes beyond just technical problems, and that is a perceived lack of innovation. And this shift in expectations becomes increasingly clear when you start to look at Starfield. It wasn't just evaluated on its own terms, but against a market that has moved forward quite a bit, where players now expect innovation and higher levels of polish at launch that Bethesda seems to struggle with. Their engine, mechanics, and exploration seems to just be vastly outdated, and that's where the reception starts to make more sense. But despite the ongoing issues, Bethesda remains in a relatively strong position. Their games still sell decently well, and they continue to rely on loyal fan bases that are willing to engage even when the experience isn't fully polished at launch. But the strength also comes with a downside, because it has to some extent normalized a wait and see approach around their releases. Instead of jumping in at launch, many players now expect to wait for multiple patches before the game reaches a more stable and complete state. And that perception doesn't exist in a vacuum alone. It's reinforced by long development cycles and slow release schedules. For example, with The Elder Scrolls 6 was revealed all the way back in 2018, and yet it's now expected to launch closer to 2027 or even 28. By that point, nearly a decade will have passed between announcement and release, and when combined with the recurring technical issues and post-launch instability, it raises a broader concern whether Bethesda is truly evolving its development approach or simply relying on the fact that players will keep coming back regardless. And this leads to a central question whether Bethesda is capable of addressing these underlying patterns that continue to produce these issues, or because of this point, the problem is no longer about the individual bugs, the specific patches, or single releases. It's about a way of making games that consistently leads to the same outcomes. If that approach doesn't change, there is a real risk that these issues will carry forward into future titles. Bethesda hasn't necessarily become a bad studio, but it is a studio that increasingly feels out of touch with what the consumers has come to expect from game titles and game companies as a whole. And it's precisely that shift from industry leader to something more uncertain that makes it feel so different from what players remember. Anyway, that's gonna do it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as I wanted to take a look at some of the things that Bethesda has done in the recent years and taking a look at their approach to developing games and communicating with the community, because it seems like there has been a lack of communication, as was pretty evident with many of the releases they have done for Starfield or the Fallout games. And I wanted to take this moment to look into what could have happened and why they might have chosen this approach. Because in my opinion, I don't think it's a good approach to take, releasing supposedly patches that are meant to fix game-breaking bugs to the public instead of just waiting another week to release it. But I guess there's the deadlines. I guess there's investors pressuring the studio to release it at certain points. But if you have to take another week or two to fix a game-breaking bug, I don't really see that they shouldn't take that opportunity to do so. So anyway, everyone, that's gonna do it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.